Stipe, originally from Connecticut, grew up in the Caribbean, lived in LA since I was 17 years old. I'm a cinematographer, I'm a director of photography, one and the same, for living in Hollywood, shoot movies and television. A director of photography is responsible for the lighting and the camera work on a film set or a television set. And primarily it's to get into the director's head and his vision or her vision of what the whole thing is supposed to look like and feel like, the mood, how it's to be lit and how it's to be shot. And so I work in collaboration with the director. I got into this business through making little Super 8 films when I was a kid. I was into Bruce Lee. I was into Kung Fu films from Hong Kong. I loved them, wanted to make them. I was a martial artist myself. And I used to do all these little films and all these little Super 8 action films. And eventually I realized that what I loved about that aspect of it was the camera and the lighting. I loved just working the camera, and I realized that eventually realized that cinematography, doing the camera work, being a cameraman is what I loved about it. And that kind of just eventually grew into, more and more professional, student things, and I worked in film labs and it kind of eventually grew into professional. I've had lots of support in my journey to become a cinematographer. One of them was one of the places I worked at full time. They let me explore if I had to take days off to do my little films or work on somebody's student film. They would do that. So I had some help along the way, and I had support from family, girlfriends, and friends. And there's so many people that there's so much that goes into it when you're working your way up in this business. One of my favorite films that really inspired me to be a cinematographer per se was Blade Runner back in 1982. One of my favorite films. I was working in theaters, movie theaters, as a box office and selling popcorn. I used to go in every day and watch that film, and it just inspired me visually. To me, it was a masterpiece. Jordan Cronenweth was a cinematographer, and his work in that film just blew me away. And the lighting, the colors, the compositions, the set decoration too. Everything involved in that film I thought was just masterful. And I think that was a big influence on me. After I was out of the American Film Institute, a lot of lean years, but eventually I got my first feature film, and as a cinematographer. Because I did work as a grip, dolly grip, electrician on some small movies. Then I got my own little independent movie as a cinematographer, and it was called The Dying Game. A really bad film, but I really liked my work in it, and that was like, when I got that, I was totally excited, because now I feel like I've really come into my own. That was a long time ago, but that was my first one, and that was very exciting. It was a 3-week shoot, very small film. It's interesting. I've worked on feature films where I've had really nice collaborations. I've had some not so nice collaborations, but some of my favorites were short films that I've worked on. I worked on a short film way back called Catherine's Promise. Gina Cafasso was the director. Her brother Joe Cafasso was a producer. Just a small little film about their grandmother. And, I just love the collaboration. I was able to talk with them and just figure out what's inside their head, what they're looking for. And they were so open to my ideas. And it was a beautiful little story. And it just was one of my favorite collaborations. I did a movie called Motives in Atlanta it was with Shamar Moore and Vivica Fox, and it was for Rainforest Films, which has since become a huge company. They do big films. And I worked with Craig Ross Jr. He brought me onto that film, which I had done small films for him before. Matter of fact, I did his first short film when he went to AFI, did a short film for AFI, and then eventually did this movie. And he brought me on as a director. I would love to work with the Coen brothers. The Coen brothers. Well, first of all, they get the best directors of photography ever. The Coen brothers get the best directors of photography ever. I love their visual style. I was a big fan of the last movie they did, Llewellyn Davis, Inside Llewellyn Davis. I love that movie. I love the feel, the mood that they achieve. It's just, I was kind of pushing for it for the Oscar, but just because I was partial to the cinematography in terms of, best cinematography. But I love their style, and they just got it down. So I would love to work with that kind of a movie, that kind of a feel. Anything, I like working with visual directors like a Scorsese. It's very visual. Somebody who really gets it. When you look at a director's style, and you see it, and wow, that is got to be a Scorsese film. That's got to be a Coppola film. Just from the visuals, you can tell that's the director that has a vision. It's not just leaving it up to the DP. And I would love to work with a director like that, where they might say, I'm thinking of this kind of a feel, this kind of a look, and then I can take that and embellish it. A typical day for a director of photography will start off, at least in production, will start off with coffee. Got to have my coffee. But you get to the set. Hopefully you've already scouted that location. You know what the location looks like, so you're ready to go. If you've done your prep, you just know exactly what needs to be done when. So you're building the camera. You have your camera team. They're building the camera. I'm meanwhile walking through the day with the director and the first AD, assistant director, and you start lighting. Once you get that day down, you know what your first shot is. We're working with the gaffer, who's my assistant in lighting, and while the camera's being built, the gaffer and I are talking about over the lighting, how it's going to look, how it's going to be lit. We start lighting, and hopefully within a not too long amount of time, we're ready to go. And then some. When I work television, sometimes it's just go. It's ready, set, go, and you're just going, at a breakneck pace till that day's done. My television credits have been lately, in the last few years, I fell into kind of recreation dramas, almost documentary. I shoot a lot of recreations. So Unusual Suspects for ID Channel, Investigation Discovery. It's crime all the time, so it's basically the true stories, what happened, why it happened, and I shoot the recreations of that. I just finished a series called Killer Kids for Lifetime Movie Network, and that just got picked up for a second season. Don't know if that's out yet, common knowledge yet, but I think it's okay. They picked it up for a second season, but we haven't started that yet. I don't know when that's going to start, but that looks fantastic. I love what we were able to achieve visually with that. The director in that case, Ralph Greco is his name. He really had a very strong vision. He would reference classic cinema, like Scorsese films, or like the movie Seven and things like that, to reference that while we're talking about how we're going to shoot, what it's going to look like. So every episode we were able to create a kind of a different feel. And so that was a lot of fun, and that looks really great. The first episode just aired on the 20th, April 20th. So I've done a lot of things like History Channel documentaries. The technology is interesting these days because it's so rapidly changing. This is like the Wild West of digital cinematography. Is like the Wild West. Just at this last NAB conference in Las Vegas, Blackmagic introduced a brand new 4K camera for like $6,000 or something like that dollars. 4K used to be like unheard of. People would think just a few years ago, people would say 4K. I don't know if we'll ever reach that point. That's going to be $1 million camera. Now it's like $6,000. Then there's another camera that came out, Aja, AJA, which is a brand. They used to make hard drives for cameras. Well, now they decided, well, if we're already making the drives, 4K drives, why don't we make the camera part too? So now they came out with a camera called the Scion, C-I-O-N. These are brand new cameras, not even on the market yet, just introducing them, and they're coming down. There's like $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 cameras. So now, going back full circle, you can be a student and you can get your hands on these cameras so much easier than when I was starting. You're talking, when I was starting, I was still doing film. I was still doing 35 millimeter film. Those cameras were $100,000. Now you got $5,000 cameras that are 4K and beautiful, and they're good cameras. So the technology, you have to keep up with it and embrace it. I fought it a little bit because I was a film guy, but eventually I just learned to embrace it, and cameras are getting better and better, and people are able to make their projects for cheaper, and they look great. I have two trains of thought regarding the technology, how accessible it is, how cheap you can make a movie on a cell phone. Do I like that? Not really, because the trained cinematographer in me, I think we've dumbed down the audiences a little bit into saying, hey, look, it doesn't matter if it's like that great a quality, it kind of doesn't matter as long as it's a good story. Now, there's part of me that agrees with that. I like that. The story is everything. So I've seen really amateur looking films that are a great story and they do well. So I get that, but there's a certain part of me that I'm just a quality person. I love the best quality you can get. And to me, that's the art of cinematography, as opposed to that in conjunction with storytelling. So I love the control I have over more advanced cameras. I'm trained that way. But an example is Craig Ross Jr. I mentioned him before. He directed some movies he actually directed some big TV shows as well. And he's done great for himself. He decided he wanted to be one of the first ones to make a cell phone movie, like an iPhone movie. And he did. He set out and he did it. And it's done now, and I actually haven't seen it yet. But, I went in one day and actually helped with the guitar. His actor had to play guitar, didn't know how, so my hands were the guitar player. But I got to see what he was doing on the set, and he had some students helping him. And so he can do it, and he did it, and he'll probably sell it. So you can do anything, I think it really does boil down to storytelling. But I do love people who respect the art of cinematography. And as long as you're respecting that art, and you're not just like, it doesn't matter what it looks like, let's just get a cell phone and shoot it. That attitude I don't like. But if somebody says, you know what, I want to do the best cell phone movie that's ever been made, the best looking one, then okay, I respect that. Most of my jobs, people find me through word of mouth. Some people, I've gotten kind of a reputation for this type of television show series, that people have called me and said, they saw your credit, I like the way your show looked. Dates from Hell or something like that I shot, so they want me to shoot this next thing. So I get a lot of word of mouth, but sometimes I submit and people interview me, and I've gotten it that way. I've submitted to online sites like Media Match, and there's others. Sometimes it's out of. There's a funny story, a quick one. Back a long time ago, I was really having trouble with work at this one stage in my life, and the girlfriend at the time thought, why don't you just look in magazines and do whatever, look everywhere for work. I said, a cinematographer, you're not going to find a job for a cinematographer in the back of a magazine. She goes, why not? And we were at a magazine stand. That's what made her think of it. And she goes, what about this magazine? And I'm not kidding you. She opened up to the back. There was ads. There was a cinematographer needed in the back of that magazine. And she goes, why don't you call that one? And I looked at it and I thought, what? I just got through saying there's no such thing as that. I called it. I worked for years for this company. So you never know. It's everywhere, anywhere. You have to do a lot of networking. I'm not the best networker, but you do. You have to meet people. You have to go to parties. Hi, I'm Ken Stipe. I'm a cinematographer here in Hollywood, and you're watching the Hollywood Elevator Magazine for artists on the rise.